Environmental degradation and health hazards. To analyze on the term industrialization and environmental degradation. To discuss about the impact groups. To visualize the health issues due to industrialization. To suggest prevent measures to eradicate environmental degradation and adhere to the concept of sustainable development. To brief various steps taken all over the world and by the Indian government to mitigate pollution. Hello students, in this session we shall discuss the most important topic of concern to our notice. It's nothing but the advent of environmental deterioration and its health effects due to industrialization. Till now, you would be aware of the different phases of industrialization. Do you know that how far industrialization has a major role as a pollutant to our environment? Do you know that we have indirectly damaged marine lives to use petrol besides the fact that it causes pollution to our atmosphere? Have you experienced nausea or breathing problems when someone in your neighborhood burns garbage at his backyard? Now imagine an industry that has a potential to exhaust tons of pollutants into air. It not only affects the region where the industry is located, but the pollutants travel miles away from its source. Could you think of other possible ways industries could affect our environment? You may ask why we should bother if environment is affected. Our environment sustains millions of live species where we are also one among them. Any degradation in atmosphere could affect us drastically. In this section, we are going to throw light on the health hazards that industrialization has caused by damaging our environment. Also, we are going to learn about the impact that our health has over us. Finally, we are going to highlight a very important topic, that is, how to survive industrialization by inducing a need for sustainable development. How industrialization causes environment to degrade. We all know how important industrialization is to our economy. But how much do we care about our environment? Activities such as manufacturing, processing, transportation, and consumption not only deplete the stock of natural resources, but also add stress to the environmental system by accumulating the stock of waste. The productivity of the industries, however, depends on the supply and quality of natural and environmental resources, while water, soil, air, forest and fishery resources are productive assets. The pollution of water, air, atmosphere and noise are the byproducts of economic development, particularly industrialization. Greenhouse effects, global warming and acid precipitation are cases in point. Untreated or improperly treated waste becomes pollution, increasing not only private costs but also social costs. Environmental degradation often tends to become irreversible and imposes damaging costs on the economy, resulting in output and human losses, loss of labor productivity from ill health and loss of crop output. So we could say the history of environmental degradation of a country is its history of industrialization. Industrialization is on the increase, which of course is necessary for the progress of human civilization, but so is the environmental pollution due to emissions and waste generated from these industries is becoming a cause of concern. The industrial pollution due to its nature has the potential to cause irreversible reactions in the environment and hence is posing a major threat to our very existence, since the carrying capacity of the environment is not unlimited and some areas or ecosystems are more susceptible to adverse environmental impacts than others. Unplanned and haphazard industrialization can substantially increase the risk to the environment. In the early days, when there were only traditional and cottage industries, the environmental degradation and resource depletion were at its minimum. The Industrial Revolution and the subsequent large-scale application of science and technology in industries gave a boost to industrial production. Thus, production by masses was shifted on to mass production. Natural resources were consumed in large quantities. Along with the rate of production, rate of pollution also increased. As students, have you ever wondered why does development cause so much damage to environment? The answer is very wide-ranging. To eliminate poverty from the people, the third world countries are running behind development, forgetting nature. It is for luxurious life that the developed countries are going after development. Well, in any case, one thing is clear. Development is a necessary evil. It is unavoidable as long as our society's well-being is concerned. But we can make out that this is not the right form of development. What kind of development is necessary is the question. What harm could the present day development do to the environment? Let's see that in the following chapters. Who suffers these degradation? When we talk about environmental degradation, it is very evident that it is we humans who are affected by it. But on a broader sense, who are the ones more susceptible to the adverse effect of environmental degradation is what we are going to discuss in this session. Environmental changes are dependent on many factors, including economic growth, population growth, urbanization, intensification of agriculture, rising energy use, and transportation. Poverty still remains a problem at the root of several environmental problems. Environmental degradation increases the vulnerability of the societies. It affects and contributes to the scarcity of resources such as water. Activities like mining could have its effects far beyond the region concerned. As an example, we can take the case of Jharkhand, which witnessed prolific mining and industrial activities that led to serious environmental degradation. Another important thing to be noted about environmental degradation is its transboundary effect. This means that the industrial growth in any part of the world has an environmental impact on every corner of the earth. Like how nuclear radiation is carried away from the nuclear site to all other coastal regions through seawater. Even though the immediate effect of nuclear radiation is comparatively low, accumulation of nuclear wastes over years can be devastating far beyond our imagination. Even plastic gets carried away by water, causing instability to aquatic ecosystem. We could also take the case of acid rain. Do you think the acid precipitation is only due to the sulfuric gas exhaust of that particular region? The answer is no. Chemicals travel all along the course of wind. So it is to be noted that no one could escape the traps of environmental degradation. However, the regions much closer to the site of industries are more exposed to degradation. Also, the development of any region can only be sustained if it is within the carrying capacity of the region. Industrialization also affects climate change, will lead to an increase in erratic weather conditions. For example, heat waves, floods, droughts, and tropical cyclone. The people hardest hit by climate change and environmental degradation are those living in the most vulnerable areas, including coastal communities, small island nations, sub-Saharan Africa and Asia Delta region. It is the poorest of the poor which lack the resources to prepare, adapt, and rebuild that are most affected. The impact of environmental disasters can be devastating on the social, economic, and environmental systems of a country or region. This also affects the global ecosystem as environmental degradations do not recognize man-made borders. Do you know? A study centralized on economics assessed the involvement of people towards degradation on the basis of willingness to accept WTA and willingness to pay WTP. It observed that people who were engaged in service or as casual workers had higher WTA and WTP. That is, they value the environment more than the others, while businessmen showed up a low WTA and WTP in general, which means they value the least about environment. The working classes were basically risk averse, and therefore They are more concerned about the damages caused by pollution to their health. This may be associated with the profile of the occupational groups, whether they are risk lovers or risk averse with respect to the risk caused due to environmental degradation. They are also exposed to pollution every day during their work or during commuting. The businessmen were found to be risk lovers by nature, and therefore they do not consider their future in as high esteem as others. The small shopkeepers are in between these two with a medium WTP and low WTA. Now, how does it cause health hazards? We've always known that our immediate surrounding determine the conditions of our life. If we live in an unhealthy environment, it has a direct effect on us. But do you know to what extent your environment could bother your health? Every minute, 5 children in developing countries die from malaria or diarrhea. Every hour, 100 children die as a result of exposure to indoor smoke from solid fuels. Every day, nearly 1,800 people in developing cities die as a result of exposure to urban air pollution. Every month, nearly 19,000 people in developing countries die from unintentional poisoning. A few effects of the major environmental problems on health are water pollution and water scarcity. A study shows that more than 2 million deaths and billions of illnesses a year are attributable to water pollution. Water scarcity further aggravates these health problems. Families, droughts are a few calamities that affect the people, even leads to loss of livelihood. Extreme weather events such as severe flooding increase the spread of waterborne diseases such as malaria and diarrhea. Air pollution. It is to be noted that urban air pollution is responsible for around 300,000 or 700,000 deaths annually and creates chronic health problems for many and more people. High concentration of pollutants in air could even damage lung functioning. Solid and hazardous wastes. Diseases are spread by uncollected garbage and clogged drains. The health risks from hazardous wastes are typically more localized but often acute. Wastes also pollute groundwater resources, which in turn lead to waterborne diseases or scarcity of quality water. Soil degradation. Depleted soils increase the risks of malnutrition for farmers. Not only does it affect farmers, it also has effects on non-farmers due to lack of good quality food grains. Deforestation. Death and disease can result from the localized flooding caused by deforestation. In addition to that, deforestation at times leads to desertification of that region. Deforestation also deprives us of natural herbs and medicinal qualities of plants that are endemic to the region. Loss of biodiversity. The main reason for loss of biodiversity is excessive depletion of natural resources or at times species. The extinction of plant and animal species will potentially affect the development of new drugs. It will also reduce ecosystem adaptability and lead to the loss of genetic resources, which could lead to imbalance in life sustainability. Loss of biodiversity stems largely from the habitat loss and fragmentation produced by the human for development. Forestry and agriculture as natural capital is progressively converted to man-made capital. Atmospheric changes. Ozone depletion is responsible for perhaps 300,000 additional cases of skin cancer a year and 1.7 million cases of cataracts. Global warming may lead to increase in the risk of climatic natural disasters. The use of fossil fuels is responsible for the buildup of greenhouse gases that are key factors in global warming. Even a modest rise in the Earth's average temperature of say 2 or 3 degrees would result in inundation of vast amounts of fertile low-lying coastal lands and the disappearance of many islands. Overcoming environmental degradation through sustainable development. Now time for us to discuss what a very important topic. Wondering what it is? Start with, let me narrate a present day scenario. In today's world, it is highly impossible to imagine a life without automobiles. Don't you agree? Imagine that you're potentially capable of using up 1 liter of petrol a day through your vehicle. Your fuel consumption for a whole year amounts to over 365 liters. Just think, if for each individual our Earth loses approximately 365 liters of fuel per annum, how much would be the millions of population consume? Could you make a rough estimation of how long our Earth would be able to supply fuel? It would be only for a few more decades. Not a large figure, isn't it? The most important question which arises from here is, how will our future generations be able to support life even without the few natural resources we have been utilizing? Thus, the present generation is endowed with a responsibility to save up our Earth's natural resources for the generations yet to come. This is termed as sustainability. Sustainable development is also a much related term, which means to develop and prosper with our current innovation and technology through sustainability. In other words, it means that we should strive for better quality of life without compromising on our environment. This obviously means industrialization is an inevitable evil to our environment. Do you know that management of the global atmosphere now involves assessment of all aspects of the carbon cycle to identify climatic changes? This has become a major focus of scientific research because of the potential catastrophic effects of climatic changes on biodiversity and human community. A few initiatives have been done worldwide to establish sustainability. Even though the underlying driver of direct human impacts on the environment is human consumption, this impact is reduced by not only consuming less, but by also making the full cycle of production, use and disposal more sustainable. Consumption of goods and services has been analyzed and managed at all scales through the chain of consumption, starting with the effects of individual lifestyle choices and spending patterns. In the year 2010, the International Resource Panel, hosted by the United Nations Environment Programme, published the first global scientific assessment on the impacts of consumption and production and identified priority actions for developed and developing countries. The study found that the most critical impacts are related to ecosystem health, human health, and resource depletion. From a production perspective, it found that fossil fuel combusting processes, agriculture, and fisheries have the most important impacts. Meanwhile, from a final consumption perspective, it found that the household consumption related to mobility, shelter, food, and energy using products cause the majority of life cycle impacts of consumption. Possible ways to prevent environmental degradation. Economic theorists have long since opined that the economic development of a region is mainly determined by the degree of industrialization achieved. However, public interest about the environmental problems emanating from the industrialization process has recently swelled significantly. It is universally accepted that the increase of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide, as well as suspended particulate matters in atmosphere, is a public health concern throughout the world. Also is the depletion of resources for industrialization. Example, electricity production involves consistent coal burning, which depletes as well as pollutes the atmosphere. At this pace, it is estimated that by the year 2050, humanity could consume around 140 billion tons of minerals, ores, fossil fuels, and biomass per year, which is 3 times its current amount unless the economic growth rate is decoupled from the rate of natural resource consumption. Extraction of natural resource doesn't involve resource depletion alone, but also leaves huge scars on the face of the earth due to mining. This is a kind of land pollution. If the mining and industrial activities are followed in a well-integrated, planned, environmentally benign way by continuing monitoring and taking effective measures in a timely manner, then it will definitely prove to be economically beneficial in a sustainable manner, thus making this a sensitive issue. The environmental challenges and the natural resources management were first focused in the year 1972 at the United Nations Human Environment Conference at Stockholm. Since then, a much greater awareness has been created not only amongst the developed countries but also the developing ones with regard to the environmental issues. A number of international committees were formed at different levels to address the environmental issues and cope up with the fast development. The World Commission on Environment and Development issued a report titled Our Common Future and appealed for the application of principles of sustainable development in the year 1987. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climatic Change was organized jointly by the United Nations Environmental Programme and World Meteorological Organization with support from the G7 nations in the year 1989. To combat the adverse effect of industrialization on the environment, India has initiated some major activities, a few of which are policy initiatives to improve environment like the National Conservation Strategy and Policy Statement for Environment and Development in the year 1992, Policy Statement for Abatement of Pollution 1992 and National Forest Policy 1988. Notification and implementation of emission and effluent standards for air, water and noise levels. Standards are formulated by a multidisciplinary group keeping in view the international standards, existing technologies and impact on health and environment. Identification and action plans for 17 categories of major polluting industry, identification of 24 critically polluted areas for pollution abatement and improving environment, of beneficiated coal with an ash content not exceeding 34% irrespective of their distance from pithead, action plans for 141 polluted river stretches to improve quality of river water, identification of clean technologies for large industries and clean technologies or processes for small-scale industries, setting up of common effluent treatment plants for clusters of SSI units, implementation of an eco-mark scheme to encourage production or consumption of environment-friendly products, preparation of a zoning atlas indicating status of the environment at district levels to guide environmentally sound location or siting of industries, mandatory submission of annual environmental statement which could be extended into environmental audit, initiation of environmental epidemiological studies in 7 critically polluted areas to study the impact of the polluted environment on health, setting up of authorities like the Environment Pollution Prevention and Control Authority for the National Capital Region for protecting and improving the quality of environment and preventing, controlling and abating environmental pollution, provision of fiscal incentives for installation of pollution control equipment and also for shifting of industries from congested areas. Well, students, it is time to conclude. It is common knowledge that increased industrial activity worldwide requires the use of natural resources which are depleting day by day. It's also true that the need for resource conservation, efficient use of resources, and they consider that sustainable development is a kind of compromise between industrial development and environmental protection. It is a strong necessity that this perception must change. People often forget that the ultimate objective of industrialization is to achieve a better quality of life for everyone, and a degraded environment means a direct threat to the quality of life. Industrialization is necessary. It has to be there, but not at the cost of the environment or for the matter of our existence. There has to be greater awareness about the need for protecting the environment, effective planning, and the ability to strike a fine balance between industrialization and environmental protection. Now, this is what we call sustainability.